We will call this meeting to order. That was a blast. I may do that again.
Just heard.
Good evening. Welcome to the council, the July 18th council meeting. My name's Neil Dobler. I'm doing a poor rendition of the mayor who is out tonight, so you'll have to put up with me. We're going to start the meeting. Please give your attention to Councilwoman Hofer for the invocation, and please stand if you are able.
I'm going to turn this on. Chaplain, you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Reverend Jack Klinger is the director of the Congregational Excellence and Connectional Ministries for the Great Plains Conference of the United Methodist Church. Prior to beginning his role in 2022, he spent 7 years as lead pastor of Topeka's First United Methodist Church. Though he and his family now worship at Cafe
Catesall.
Yeah. Thank you. On Sunday mornings, they remain connected to First through youth programming. Jeff is married to Heather, and they have 2 children. One is a freshman at Topeka High this fall, and the other is an incoming 6th grader at Landon Middle School, both enrolled in the dual language program. Jeff and his family are glad to live in Topeka, to be investing in the community through churches and schools alike. Jeff also serves as a volunteer chaplain within the Topeka Fire Department.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Appreciate it. Let's pray together. God of all creation, we pause this evening, our minds already racing on the business that is before us, our minds still full from the day that has been. We pray that you would give us a sense of clarity and focus, that we would see and hear and be aware of you in the midst of all of these conversations this evening and always. We pray that you would help us to see you in one another, even when it is challenging, especially when it is challenging. We pray for the leaders of our community, elected and otherwise, for those who are making a difference from seats of power and from the margins, and for all people who are seeking to invest for the good of the city in formal and informal ways. We are grateful, O God, for your love. We are hopeful for the future to which you're calling us, and we pray all of this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
All right, Mayor Padilla is absent this evening, so council members Hiller.
Here.
Valdivia Aquila.
Here.
Ortiz.
Here.
Emerson.
Here.
Kale.
Here.
Nager.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Dobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
And Hofer.
Here.
We have 9 present.
Thank you. We have 2 proclamations tonight. The first one is for the Black, Indigenous, and People of Color Mental Health Month. I would ask Bill Persinger from Vallejo Behavioral Health Care to come forward with anybody you would like.
I miss anybody out there with Vallejo? Anybody? All right. Deputy Mayor, thank you, sir. It's an honor.
Thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
All right, let everybody get up here.
All right, folks. There we go.
All right, fantastic. This is a proclamation by the mayor. Whereas good mental health is essential to everyone's overall health and well-being, and whereas services are accessible and affordable for those in need in Topeka and Shawnee County, Kansas. And whereas with treatment, those individuals with mental health conditions can recover and lead full productive lives. And whereas individuals who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color have additional mental health challenges, such as, for example, the social determinants of health related to the neighborhood or community where one lives, language and cultural barriers between providers and consumers, and the effects of chronic stress related to discrimination. And whereas there are significant disparities that place individuals who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color at greater risk for serious mental health problems, such as, for example, decreased access to mental health care for all individuals and communities, including prevention, treatment, and recovery services for mental and substance use disorders. And whereas each business, government agency, healthcare provider, organization, and citizen can, through their proactive individual and collective actions, promote good mental health and recovery for persons in the racial minority population. Now, therefore, Mayor Michael A. Padilla, Mayor of Topeka, Mayor of the City of Topeka, Kansas, does proclaim the month of July 2023 as BIPOC Mental Health Awareness Month. And we encourage citizens of Topeka to support all mental health organizations in our community who work to promote mental health and wellness. In witness whereof, the Mayor of City of Topeka, Michael A. Padilla, has affixed his official signature. And I'm going to give that official document to you, sir, and you may
Proudly take
make
that,
some
please.
remarks if you would like.
Deputy Mayor, thank you. Members of the council, city staff, thank you so much for supporting what we do at Vallejo Behavioral Health Care. We accept this with great humility and with a great deal of honor. I would like the folks to step forward and introduce themselves and say to the council and staff and audience your affiliation with Vallejo. So, Frank, I'll defer.
Anderson, past chair of the Vallejo Behavioral Health Governing Board, and certainly appreciate the support the city provided over the years.
Marcus Althaus, I'm an HR recruiter at Vallejo and also a chairperson on the diversity committee.
My name is Nicole Graves. I am a board member of Community Residential Program, CRP.
My name is James Buck. I'm a foundational board member.
Tyler Levere, current chair of Vallejo's Behavioral Health.
Kathy Harmon, member of Vallejo's Behavioral Health Board.
And former staff member.
Former staff member.
Such an honor to have old colleagues come back. Well, I'll tell you what, we've worked very hard, very intentionally the last 6 or 7 years to, have our board reflect what our community feels and needs and looks like, and the values and the culture of our community. Same with the staff. Marcus here has done a great effort to get our vacancy rate down to just 11% from somewhat higher than that, but doing much better than now and filling some positions. Many thanks to Marcus and his colleagues. I have to tell you, as I do every chance I get, that Vallejo would not be able to operate a co-responder program with our Topeka Police Department colleagues were it not for the support of the elected leaders, the policymakers, and the staff of the city of Topeka. We would not be able to operate our detox program and several other initiatives that we have around town. So we thank you for your support. We just would not, major pieces of who we are would not be here without you. I'm going to defer to Board President Tyler now.
I don't have Bill's knack for words, so I would just like to thank our elected officials and governing body here for your support and collaboration as we address the needs of our community.
Mayor, thank you so much. We appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Great organization. I know the mayor would have like to have been here personally to do that, but I appreciate the opportunity. I'd like to ask Anthony Fidel and Steve Schonenberg to step forward, please.
Let's see how my driving's gonna be here.
Come right on up if you'd like. That's good as well.
Where he's saying, Steve is saying,
Oh,
where
I'm
would
sorry.
you like me? Do you want me to help you out, basically?
That'll work, Mr. Steve. I'll take you up on it. That way you guys can get done by 10 o'clock.
Nice to have that ramp in here. I think that's something fairly new. So. Somewhat fitting, I believe. This is a certificate of recognition for the American with Disability Act. On July 26, 1990, President George H.W. Bush signed into law the Americans with Disabilities Act, we know as ADA, to ensure the civil rights of people with disabilities. This legislation established a clear and comprehensive national mandate for the elimination of discrimination against individuals with disabilities. On July 26th, we will celebrate the anniversary of the signing of the ADA. The ADA has expanded opportunities for Americans with disabilities by reducing barriers and changing perceptions and increasing full participation in community life. However, the full promise of the ADA will only be reached if we remain committed to continuing our efforts to fully implement the ADA. On the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the City of Topeka celebrates and recognizes the progress that has been made by reaffirming the principles of equity, inclusion, and recommitting our efforts to reach full ADA compliance. Therefore, Michael A. Padilla, Mayor for the City of Topeka, Kansas, does hereby recognize July 26, 2023 as the 33rd anniversary for the signing of the ADA into law. In witness whereof, the Mayor of the City of Topeka has affixed his signature in the official seal of the City of Topeka. And I have one of these for each of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Anthony, would you like to say a couple words? Figure out how to.
Well, my name's Anthony Padale, and I've been on the Topeka Council for, this is my second term. In my day job, I am the state's ADA coordinator. Been doing that job for 26 years. So some of you that know me know there's a little less hair up here, but we're making progress, and we greatly, I'll just say that this is we appreciate the commitment of the council, we appreciate the commitment of the mayor, and we look forward to working with everyone to make this city as accessible as possible. And with that, I'll turn it over to our chairman, Mr. Steve.
If you can, hold this for me, Anthony. Thank you. My name is Steve. Last name is Schoenberg. And today I am the chairperson for the ADA Advisory Council. I want to thank so much the mayor and this entire council for recognizing ADA and the Americans with Disabilities Act. I thank for all of the continued support for individuals with disabilities. Our council would not be possible to do all the things that we have done without all of your support. And so I want to also thank Anthony here for being a part of the ADA law as well, because our shared different perspectives has really made this a really beneficial experience. So thank you so much, Anthony. And thank you also for this recognition.
I'm going to let you drive me off sometime.
All right, two outstanding organizations, and we appreciate both of them being here tonight and the opportunity to give this recognition. Before we get started, since I'm running the meeting, I can take just a point of personal privilege. I'd like to ask the city manager, I'm going to put him on the spot here, but last Friday we had a terrific storm go through the city of Topeka, and other cities to the east experienced the same things. We had power down, traffic signals out, wastewater and water plants out of electricity, trees and limbs down everywhere. And our city staff responded in a phenomenal way. And city manager, I just ask you to take a minute and recognize them.
Well, as Braxton and Sylvia make their way to the podium, I can tell you that you are exactly right. Every employee we had, whether they're in the field or they're in the office, responded to the emergency at hand and got the information out. Gretchen was on vacation, but working with Taylor, helped to get those new releases out. I've been through a storm like this when I was up north during my career, so I have an understanding about what that takes. And you all were very patient, and what you did to help out was pass along your neighbors' concerns, and we were able to get answers back to you. But every employee in this city did their job plus more, so.
So I just want to say this was a great example of the city staff really stepping up and towing the mark. This is a great opportunity. It's a great example of when opportunity meets preparation. So we have contractors rolling through the city right now, picking up debris. Glad we can offer this service. They are going to make a second pass. We hope towards the end of this week or beginning of next week to be done with the first pass. So, thank you.
All right, we will move on to item 3, the consent agenda. Clerk will read.
A is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller approving a special event known as the Brewbank Birthday Bash. B is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller granting Brewbank an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at seat concerning noise prohibitions. C is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller approving a special event known as the India Mela. D is an ordinance introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller designating a portion of the Crosby Place parking garage as temporarily exempt from the provisions of KSA 41719D and TMC 915020E. E are minutes of the regular meeting of July 11, 2023, and there are no applications.
Thank you. Excuse me, you've heard the consent agenda. It would entertain a motion.
Only appropriate.
Motion by Councilwoman Hiller,
Second.
second by Councilman Duncan. Clerk will call the roll.
Councilmembers Hiller?
Yes.
That's fine. This should be Hofer, sorry, went out of order. Councilmember Hofer?
Yes.
Hiller's a yes. Valdivia Acala?
Yes.
Emerson?
Yes.
Ortiz?
Yes, I'm down here.
Kell?
Yes.
Nager?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dobler?
Yes.
And Duncan?
Yes.
We have 9 yes. Motion carries.
Thank you. Motion is carried. We'll move on to item 4, action items. Clerk will read item 4A.
A is a resolution introduced by interim city manager Richard Neinstead providing notice that the city is considering establishing a reinvestment housing incentive district, an RHID, for the Eastgate subdivision number 4 and adopting a plan for the development of housing and public facilities in the proposed RHID and establishing the date and time of a public hearing.
So Mayor and governing body, Brianna will lead you through this. I believe we've had a discussion about this, and this has been in the system for a while. I think we're also going to talk about the funding agreement.
Yes, yeah, briefly. Yeah, good evening. Thank you. So, yes, this is a request to set the public hearing for the Eastgate subdivision. So this would be our first RHID that would be going into the final phase, seeking the public hearing, at which point we would review the development agreement, we would have a project presentation, and then the developer would be present to answer any questions and talk about the project in detail. And then we're trying to set for public hearing for the date of August 22nd. I will share that the RHID Review Committee, which is made up of mayor, deputy mayor, the city council person representing the district in which the RHID falls in, and then also staff that's required to be there as well, did meet on June 27th and unanimously voted to continue to move this project forward into the process. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Any questions? Councilwoman Ortiz?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm going to move to approve this. I think this is well needed in this area, and residents are very excited, so I'll move to approve.
It's been a motion for approval. I'll get second.
I mean, I can second. Yeah.
That'd be great. Second by Councilman Duncan. Any questions?
So
Councilman.
the hearing's during a council meeting, right?
That's correct.
Do we have a council meeting on August 22nd? Okay, because that's the fourth Tuesday.
Because you canceled the first in August for the election.
Not on my calendar. See, thank you. Now I will make sure I'm here.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right. Question? Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none on the screen, we have a motion and a second. The clerk will call the roll.
Okay, council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Hofer.
Yes.
We have 9 yes, motion carries.
All right. Motion is carried. We'll move on to 4B. The clerk will read.
So this is a ordinance to,
Hold on a
approving
second.
Oh, sorry.
All right.
B is a resolution introduced by interim city manager Richard Neinstead in accordance with section 1860-010 of the Topeka Municipal Code, approving a conditional use permit to allow the use of a surface parking lot in association with the principal use on property presently zoned R2 Single Family Dwelling District line south of Southwest 7th Street and between Southwest Clay and Southwest Buchanan in the city of Topeka, Shawnee County, Kansas.
All right, I still get a little excited up here thinking ahead, but it's what the city clerk said, and Dan Warner will lead you through this.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, Governing Body, CU 2302 is a request for a conditional use permit by Aslan Properties, essentially Care Paravel. The property is located at Southwest 7th, Southwest Buchanan, and Clay. The CUP is for an off-street parking area. The CUP is necessary here because the property is zoned R2, single family, and that parking lot's not on their property. If the parking lot was on the property, it would not require a CUP, it would be an accessory use. The purpose is to allow a parking lot associated with the school. The CUP provides requirements that the site and landscape plan reflect setbacks and landscaping to help ensure compatibility with the neighborhood. We had a neighborhood information meeting. We also had, the applicant had a second meeting with the neighborhood to talk about this. Planning Commission recommended approval 5-2, and staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. I do need to read a statement on ex parte, but before I do that, I will ask if there's any questions. No questions? All right. This does require ex parte communication notification if you've had such. Prior to proceeding with the vote, each member of the governing body who is engaged in ex parte communication with any individual in favor of or against the matter being considered must state that that communication occurred and indicate that even in light of having engaged in the communication, they were able to fairly, objectively, and impartially consider the measure based only upon the evidence provided on the record. The record includes the Planning Commission minutes, the staff report and its attachments, the public comments made during the Planning Commission hearing, and similar relevant information related to the matter. So I'll ask the question, has anybody on the council had ex parte or even parte communication? Seeing none? Oh,
I don't know if I need to mention this or not. It's in my district, obviously. I have been aware of the communication, and I want to really give great credit to both Care Paravel and the neighborhood for each affirmatively working out to each other to work together on this, both for short and long-range planning. But again, I've not been in the middle of those conversations, and I don't feel it would affect my vote.
so you just like had conversations with yourself?
Something like that.
Got it. All right. Seeing no further comments, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion from Councilwoman Hiller, second. Second from Councilwoman Ortiz. Clerk will call the roll.
Councilmembers Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Hill,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
and Hiller.
Yes.
We have 9 yes, motion carries.
All right, motion carries. Let's move on to item 4C. The clerk will read.
C is a resolution introduced by interim city manager Richard Neinstead in accordance with the section 1860-010 of the Topeka Municipal Code, approving a conditional use permit to allow operation of a daycare facility type 2, providing childcare as needed for up to 28 children, currently zoned R2 single-family dwelling district and located at the southwest corner of Southeast Lott Street and Southeast Wisconsin Avenue in the city of Topeka, Shawnee County, Kansas.
Mr. Warner will walk you through this, too.
Deputy Mayor, governing body, our second conditional use permit up for consideration this evening is for a daycare facility type 2. That requires a conditional use permit in R2. The distinction between a type 1 and 2, in case anybody cares, the type 1 is less than 12 people or 12 people under the care of the facility. Type 2 is more than 12, so they're going to have more than 12, so they need the CUP for this one. So conditions of approval with this CUP address traffic flow, landscaping, and building design standards to help keep this property suited to the character of the neighborhood. They are constructing a new building. This is not converting a building. This will be a new building. Neighborhood information meeting was held prior to the public hearing. Planning Commission recommended approval unanimously. Staff also recommends approval.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Again, I'll read the paragraph on communication, but prior to that, any questions of Mr. Warner? Seeing none, it's going to be exactly the same thing, but it's required that we read it every time, so bear with me. Prior to proceeding with the vote, each member of the governing body who is engaged in ex parte communication with any individual either in favor of or against the matter being considered must state that the communication occurred and indicate that even in light of having engaged in the communication, they were able to fairly, objectively, and impartially consider the measure based only upon the evidence provided on the record. The record includes the Planning Commission minutes, the staff report and its attachments, the public comments made during the Planning Commission hearing, and similar relevant information related to the matter. So I'll ask the council members if anybody has had ex parte communication. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Deputy Mayor, this is in my district, and it fits a great need for childcare. So I will happily move approval.
Great. Second. We have a motion by Councilman Emerson, a second by Councilman Kell. The clerk will take the roll.
Councilmembers Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Hale,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Hiller,
Yes.
and Valdivia Aquila.
Yes.
We have 9 yes, motion carries.
Thank you. We will move on to item 4D. Clerk will read.
D is an ordinance introduced by interim city manager Richard Neinstead, amending the district map referred to and made a part of the zoning ordinances by section 1850-050 of the Topeka Municipal Code by providing for certain changes in zoning on property located at the northeast corner of the intersection of Southeast Horseshoe Bend Drive and Southeast 45th Street from R1 Single Family Dwelling to C2 Commercial District.
City Manager?
Mr. Warner will lead you through this again.
All right.
You getting it? Getting it down.
Deputy Mayor, Governing Body, a little different project this time. This is a straight rezoning case. The property being rezoned, proposed for being rezoned, is about a third of an acre out of a approximately 7-acre parcel. That 7-acre parcel is currently zoned C2 and has been that way for a while. The R1 is a bit of a remnant. There was a house on that property for the longest time, and that house has been removed, so they're asking to rezone that remnant R1 to C2 as well, basically to allow the owner to develop the corner for commercial uses. We had a neighborhood information meeting. Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval. Staff recommends approval as well.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Any questions from the body? All right.
Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
I was looking through stuff. Has there been presented what commercial property would go in there, or is this, there's one to rezone it at this time?
I believe there was a pre-application and some ideas were probably discussed at that point, but nothing to share at this point. Really just asking for the rezoning to kind of clean up that property.
I move to approve.
All right. We have a motion by Councilman Kell. Second by Councilman Emerson. Same chapter, third verse. I'll read this again. Prior to proceeding with the vote, each member of the governing body who is engaged in ex parte communication with any individual, either in favor of or against the matter being considered, must state that the communication occurred and indicate that even in light of having engaged in the communication, they were able to fairly, objectively, and impartially consider the measure based only upon the evidence provided on the record. The record includes the Planning Commission minutes, the staff report and its attachments, the public comments made during the Planning Commission hearing, and similar relevant information related to the matter. So I'll ask if anybody on this body has had ex parte communication. Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Clerk will call the roll, please.
Councilmembers Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
and Ortiz. Yes. What do you get? All right. We have 9 yes. Motion carries.
All right. Motion is carried. We will move on to item 4E. The clerk will read.
E is a resolution introduced by interim city manager Richard Neinstedt notifying the county clerk of 1, a proposed intent to exceed the revenue neutral rate for the city of Topeka's 2024 budget, 2, the proposed tax rate, and 3, the date, time, and location of the public hearing to consider adopting a budget that exceeds the revenue neutral rate.
City Manager.
Our Chief Financial Officer will lead you through this discussion. He will explain to you and to the public, because I'm sure they have questions on this, on exactly what a revenue neutral rate is and what the impact is upon your budget making and how that impacts the public.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, members of the council, this first procedural step is to notify the county clerk that the city intends to exceed the revenue neutral rate. Passing this resolution does not obligate the governing body to adopt the mill rate levy in the resolution. This just sets the hearing for September the 5th.
City Manager.
So, Freddie, you might also explain where you get that number.
So the mill levy rate is the rate that we utilize to calculate the property taxes on everybody's property. The intent is to keep the rate fixed from previous year, and Because of that, that would, and according to the new policy, that would exceed the revenue neutral rate. So this is why these resolution and the hearing in September the 5th is important.
Thank you.
All right, any questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Councilwoman Hiller has made a motion. Is there a second? Councilman Emerson, the clerk, Councilwoman.
Just to clarify for the public, I'm restating a little bit how Freddie covered it, is that it means we could go over, when we finally adopt the budget, we can adopt one for more than the tax revenue level that we had last year. We don't have to, but that we can. It leaves the door open for us to have those discussions, correct? Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? All right, clerk?
Councilmembers Kell,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
No.
Hofer,
Yes.
Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson.
Yes.
All right, we have 8 yes with Councilmember Duncan voting no, so the motion carries.
Thank you. We will move on to the last item on the action agenda, item 4F. Clerk will read.
F is a resolution introduced by interim city manager Richard Neinstead notifying the county clerk of 1, a proposed intent to exceed the revenue neutral rate for the Topeka Metro Transit Authority, TMTA, and 2, the proposed tax rate, and 3, the date, time, and location of the public hearing to consider adopting a budget that exceeds the revenue neutral rate.
And our chief financial officer will walk you through this, and I will just say this. Some members of the public might wonder why we are doing this for TMTA. Well, it's a statutory obligation on your part. They are a separate tax levying agency, but the legislature, in their wisdom, put them under you, where you have to approve this, much like how rec commissions and some libraries are handled.
Thank you. Sir?
Deputy Mayor, members of the council, this is also a first procedural step to notify the county clerk that the Topeka Metro intends to exceed the revenue neutral rate. Once again, passing this resolution does not mean that the governing body intends to accept that rate. It just means that we are setting just a hearing for the same days as the previous resolution.
Thank you. It might be helpful to mention that both these actions tonight drive the budgets out several weeks into September. We typically pass the budget at the end of August, but this takes us a little further, correct?
Yes, sir.
Great. Any questions? None? All right. Look for a motion.
Move approval.
Motion for approval by Councilman Emerson, a second by Councilwoman Hofer.
Access.
Pardon? Oh. We have a motion and a second. The clerk will.
Who is the second?
Councilwoman Hofer.
Thank you.
Clerk
Okay.
will take the vote.
Councilmembers Nager,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
and Kell.
Yes.
All right, we have 9 yes, motion carries.
All right. And there was no public comment on any of those last items. I failed to mention that. Nobody had signed up for them, although public comment was allowed. The previous items, the zoning items, there was no public comment allowed on those. So we move now to Section 5, the non-action items. Clerk will read.
A is discussion on recent homelessness efforts, including camp cleanups and ordinance enforcement.
Mr. City Manager.
Governing body, as you're aware, homeless is a major discussion in our community like other communities. This is the start of trying to focus on homelessness, trying to focus a discussion, trying to give some historical perspective, trying to explain what we do. It's not a one and done discussion. You'll see some further discussions as we go down the road. And actually, hoping to develop some strategies. I was at a meeting in Oakland last night, and it was interesting to sit there. It is important, I believe, and I think here's a neighborhood we can work with the councilwoman's assistance, to really sit down and develop some strategies on what we can and what we can't do with the homeless population. And that's a big order. But I do know this, if we don't talk about it, if we don't talk about it with our neighborhood and our citizens and get them involved, we won't be able to develop strategies that last with dealing with homeless. And so tonight, Amanda Stanley, the city attorney, will lead this staff presentation with you, and it includes Carrie Higgins, Housing Services Division, John Chardine, Property Maintenance Inspector, Kristen Moorhead, City Manager's Assistant, and Major Jana Harden, Topeka Police Department.
Okay. Thank you, City Manager. The slides are up here. They're also in your agenda packet. I am just going to kick this off before I turn over to the experts who are in the field every day truly dealing with this problem. The first part that I was tasked with was just giving an overarching explanation of the law. And I will tell for the public listening that we are developing a Q&A that's going to start living on our website, so that when you have questions about, is this allowed here, is it not allowed here, you have an easy one-stop access place so that you can find phone numbers to call, links to ordinances, and all of that. We're in the process of finalizing that this week, and then that will go live as well. But the overarching framework currently, until in your wisdom you decide to change it or not change it, is our city code. And that is an ordinance that was adopted by a previous governing body. And that sets out where camping is legal in the city of Topeka and where it is not. Camping is a very broad term. It is anything that is used to sleep, cook, eat, store personal items on public property. The baseline rule in the city of Topeka that camping is allowed on all public property except where it is specifically prohibited. And that is under public infrastructure, such as our bridges, our overpasses, our flood control works, bus shelters. I think there's a very practical purpose for that, for public safety issues, if you think about issues with fires under bridges, for example. Within 10 feet of a doorway, loading dock, stairway, or fire escape, and then within certain boundary areas downtown, and that is where camping is specifically prohibited. About a year and a half ago, if you want to move to the next slide, I was tasked as city attorney with coming up with an administrative policy for the city to follow when it is necessary to clean up public lands. So when I came on as city attorney about 2 years ago, the Topeka Police Department took me on a tour of various public lands. And there's a difference between camping and converting public lands to private use with fences or houses or other types of areas. And so at that time, I was tasked with coming up with an administrative policy. And this is just the legal framework. John will be the one that actually talks about how it's used. But the administrative policy that was adopted was based off of cities all across the United States, as well as Kansas, that have had policies challenged and come up with this legal way to clean up public land. It involves making sure that occupants are all notified within 72 hours that we will be cleaning up city property. It requires allowing people to return to areas where it's legally camped. We have guidelines about not going in when it is under certain temperatures or when it is raining. Pictures are taken. These are all done with body cam footage generally, so that we have good axon footage that shows what property was there, what it was looking like before, after. And then staff also gives people the ability to move personal property if they are present, to make sure that items are retained. For example, if medicine or other things are left behind, making sure that those are restored so that people can get their medicines. And so The city of Topeka does not store certain items for safety issues. For example, we don't store live animals. We don't store illegal items, things that are infested, explosives, wet, soiled items we do not save, and we do not save any food or liquids. This is a pretty standard administrative policy that matches cities across the entire United States. That's the legal framework, but now I'm going to turn over to John Chardine, who can talk about how it actually works in the real world.
Good evening, Council. My staff will encounter probably encampments on a weekly, if not a daily basis. That can be on either public or private property. That includes right-of-ways. So, as you're aware, we can only enforce our codes and ordinances on private property. If we encounter an encampment, we have to decide if it's a live encampment or if it's an abandoned encampment. If it's live, my inspectors they're encouraged to, make contact with the occupants. Employee safety is utmost a priority with this. So if we do make contact, we offer them assistance, EAS with housing services, TRM, and we notify the police department and their behavior health unit. Encampments are byproducts of abandoned properties, vacant properties, neglected properties, and mismanaged properties. I have yet to come across a piece of property where we have a property owner that is local and is unaware of it. These typically are properties that are owned and operated by property owners who don't pay attention. They may be out of town. They may be checking on me every now and then. It's typically hidden from sight, normal pedestrian and vehicular traffic. The average age of an encampment is 3 to 5 years before complaints are made. So when you do see this encampment, it's been there for quite some time. If I remember correctly, we cleaned out, I say we, it was really Darren Coughlin and his crew, cleaned out an encampment that was located on 501 property that was every bit of 10 years old. These encampments are spread their locations by word of mouth. As for the PMU, since January 2023, we conducted 75 sanitation cleanups. 10 of those were encampments. 2 of them were corrected by the owner. So we encourage volunteer compliance. We make contact with the property owners when it is private property. If we don't get voluntary compliance, we have no choice but to force compliance. Of those forced compliance, it charged the property owners $3,786, and the rubbish removed came to 11.5 tons. I would feel this would be an injustice if I didn't mention securements. In our city, we have several buildings that are unoccupied and they're on the verge of being abandoned. And it's tough on my staff to get the owners to maintain these buildings, and this becomes a byproduct of these encampments, because I assure you, these ongoing continued securements are always located walking distance from an encampment. These can be non-residential and residential properties. We will continue to offer assistance to the occupants of these encampments. We will do everything possible and legally available to us. But we still have to enforce our codes. Thank you.
Good evening. So I was just going to talk a little bit about what the Topeka Police Department has done. I'll just talk about since January of this year, much like John spoke of. We're basically there to assist. We're not leading the charge, but we're there to help. Our behavioral health unit consists of 3 officers, and their lot in life is to take care of people in mental health crisis or any type of crisis, and obviously the homeless as well. We have 1 officer that is specifically assigned to address homelessness. In that regard, he goes out and makes contact with these people nearly daily, at least weekly, and has a good relationship with these people. So we're more familiar with a certain number of them and understand their needs, wants, or lack of needs or wants. So the behavioral health unit always is, they go out on site, and then when we are getting ready to do an abatement, they post the 72-hour notice, which is the legal notice that we have to post on their tent or their semi-permanent structure, whatever it may be, so they know they have 72 hours. In fairness, we usually go out a week or 2 weeks in advance to let them know this is coming, and then we post the legal 72 hours. Anytime we're doing an abatement, we have officers on site throughout. So when Darren Coughlin and his people or forestry's out there, we have officers on scene, one, because we have a relationship with the people who are being affected, and two, just for any security measures. We have not had any issues, but in the event there were an issue, we're there and have good relationships with the people who are being directly affected. Like I said, we're there to assist. In the assistance this year so far, we've worked with Water Pollution Control. Darren Coughlin is invaluable. He's an amazing resource and is probably the smartest guy I know. Streets and Public Works, Forestry, PMU, Housing Services, Topeka Rescue Mission, the Fire Department, and Vallejo are those who we worked with thus far in the abatements that we've done. And currently, as John said, majority of them we don't notice. They've been there for 5 or 10 years, and until somebody goes to develop the property, they don't know that they are there. So the ones that we have addressed thus far have been those that are obvious and apparent and affecting the waterways and things that way. So that's where we've been so far with our assistance.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, governing body. I'm going to cover an overview of what our current homeless programs are. The first is Equity Access Shelter. This is a single access point for anyone that needs rent or utility assistance. Individuals will call, staff will do an assessment with each individual that gives them a score. This score is based on their level of need and their level of crisis, which then when agencies have funding, we're able to pull names based on those scores. This ensures that we're able to help those with the greatest need first and foremost. To date, we have sent out over 614 referrals to our partnering agencies. I will say that we do have a long wait list for those that still need rent assistance. This initiative funnels everything through the one access point, which is fantastic for those in need. It also has given us clarity on how great the need is in our community compared to how many individuals need help. The second program is Impact Avenues. It is a program for homeless students and their families in Shawnee County. This is a collaborative effort between 41 different partner agencies. So we are really looking at what is the root cause of their homelessness, and then we're getting them connected to resources, getting them connected to services with partner agencies so that we can really address those barriers and issues. It also entails 12 months of intensive case management so that we are not only housing these families, but we're making sure they can sustain that housing and then also move to self-sufficiency. To date, we have housed over 168 households, which includes 407 children that are now in permanent stable housing as a result. And then our third program is Shelter Plus Care. This is a homeless voucher program for those who are suffering from either a severe mental illness, chronic substance abuse, or AIDS and HIV. So this program provides a portion of their rent every month, or if their income is zero, it provides all of their rent every month. And then there's the care piece of it. They are highly encouraged to be involved in either case management, treatment, therapy, something to also help them move towards self-sufficiency as well. And we have roughly 310 individuals every month. That number varies slightly, but roughly 310 individuals that are on the Shelter Plus Care program.
Good evening. Good evening. Close enough. There we go. Along with our city ordinances and our city cleanup efforts and our housing programs, we have worked with our facilitator, Brianna Silver from Silver Consulting. She was brought on in February to provide innovative coaching. She will be present virtually during a July 25th special meeting to provide more context surrounding her work. But in the meantime, I've been asked to touch very briefly on some highlighted events that she'll be covering more in depth next week. So the city organized a homeless summit that took place in April, in which over 40 45 organizations were represented. These organizations included nonprofits, churches, private businesses, as well as city, county, and state officials. The purpose of the summit was twofold: to build relationships and foster partnerships with other entities that intersect with the homeless population, and to task these practitioners with identifying the gaps in service within our community. So these service providers called out the causes of homelessness and/or the circumstances that impeded solutions for homelessness. 6 focus areas were identified. Those were stagnated systems, trauma, mental health, lack of fundamental life skills, lack of stable shelter and housing options, and NIMBY, not in my backyard mindsets. Practitioners then discussed and voted on the area and type of service in which they felt the city could lead. And through that process, the service gap that was identified the most was the need of a low barrier shelter and/or transitional housing. But this was just a hypothesis. Following this summit, this presentation, an April 11th presentation, was brought to the governing body to communicate the information that we received. The April 11th presentation, which I don't believe is in your packet but can be sent to you, discussed City Manager Wade's next steps for the governing body and the recommendation that the innovation plan with our facilitator test the hypothesis of a low barrier shelter or transitional housing to determine whether this would be a viable solution for the city of Topeka. Upon receiving approval, the June workshop operated under that context. However, and the next slide, as we continue to be committed to transparency in our decision-making process, next week during our special meeting, Brianna Silver will be able to elaborate more on the details of these events that was communicated to her with the prior city manager. And she will discuss her methodology, her data gathering techniques, a plan for cultivating community engagement and dialogue, and she will be seeking governing body guidance for next steps on moving forward, whether that is continuing with the hypothesis of a low barrier shelter or moving away from that hypothesis altogether. Again, her presentation will be virtually held on July 25th. At this time, I will hand the discussion back to our acting city manager.
Amanda, you want to wrap us up?
I would just say that anybody here is happy to answer questions that as you have them. And again, one of the things I heard last night when I was at the meeting down in Noto is a desire for more information, a desire to have an easy place to access things so that as you have concerns about what number do I call if I see someone in mental health crisis, where do I go to get resources? How can I donate to the right organizations? So all of those are things that we are putting together in a Q&A to live on the website so that the public has an easy place to turn to for a lot of those questions so that you don't have to track down someone in various departments, but you can have one place to go.
Question.
All right, thank you for that presentation. We'll entertain any questions at this point. I've got Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala and then Councilman Kell. Councilwoman?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The first question I want to ask, and thank you for putting together the presentation and all the hard work that everyone's doing. So setting aside for the moment the dialogue about a low barrier shelter, I had asked for information that showed a plan that was actually in place that former city manager Wade had that I don't think anyone was able to find, but I'm asking for it again, that actually showed what the process was as these encampments were raised. I was never given any information until after the fact, and I think that's probably the way it was with the majority of the governing body that I'm aware of. I had to seek out the information to find out what was going on. I was told after a camp was raised, and again, I am not the city manager. I am a single council person trying to feel my way in the dark for the past 3.5 years. So what it looks like to me is that no one seems to know what the plan was as these encampments were raised. Because my sense is what is happening is that as these encampments are raised without being able to determine an actual path, if we have enough beds, which I were told that we do not yet, and if this is not just leading because of the reactive nature of how all of this started spinning out of control, is that the encampments are being raised, but people are moving. They're moving to other parts of the city, or they're moving to other parts of District 2. And I am wondering, that's my first question, if there's any validation to any of that, with other people that were involved at departmental level with City Manager Wade, was there a plan for this raising?
Major Hardin's probably the best person to answer this, and see if she has any insight.
I don't know where to look to even look at the councilwoman. Anyway, the plan, there wasn't a grand plan. The two that we raised on the riverfront were because of the proximity to the waterway. Darren Coughlin is, I don't know the name of it, but through the Corps of Engineers, he is responsible for ensuring the waterways are clear. Those encampments were in front of the barrier that is necessary to keep the waterways clear, which is, I believe, 15 feet from the toe of the levee. And those encampments were in clear violation of that. So we moved those camps. As far as them moving out, those camps did not move out. They moved back and up while we did the work, and then they moved right back to where they began without their permanent or semi-permanent structures. I don't know where to look.
I'm here. I'm up here.
Okay. I don't know, does that answer some of your question?
It does and it doesn't. I mean, I'm not meaning to press you on this, Ms. Harden. I'm wanting a bottom line to understand what the plan was. I also know that there was the huge encampment by 501 that was raised. Was there any dialogue during that time where these folks were going to go? Was there any concern that they were just going to cycle back into where they were? Or, I mean, like, what happened? It sounds like with the one that you're talking about, but...
In regards to the ones on the riverfront, I left out the part about WPC going in and putting in the barrier wall so that they have the buffer necessary so they're not impeding on the waterway again. Now, as far as the one on 501 property, being private property, John Chardine was there for that, and I will let him talk more about that one. I wasn't present for that one.
I will tell you the planning for that activity lasted about 3 weeks, and it heavily involved TRM. TRM was probably on-site 3 out of 5 days a week, trying to make contact with the occupants, trying to find them some services, offered to drive them. We try to do everything to get them off that embankment. Finally, they had 2 people volunteer to move their belongings, and they moved them somewhere. I don't know where they moved them, but it was all voluntary. I will tell you that after they were moved, Darren and his crew removed about 70 tons of rubbish off that embankment. It was a 3-day process. It wouldn't have took 3 days, but we had a rain delay. And that was the north and south side of that Shunga Trail. So.
Well, thank you for that John, and all the hard work that you guys have done is really appreciated. I think that you understand a little bit of my confusion is like, where are they going? If we're told there's not enough beds, where are they going? And are they going to TRM, or, once they leave the encampments and, are they just finding somewhere else? That's my real question. And I think that it shows the commitment by the city, and nothing towards the directors, but I mean the city as an entity, finally to start moving on some of this, but it just feels like it's kind of a shell game, like they're here, now they're here, now they're here. And to me, that just would mean that, there's going to be more work for city employees because the same ones are camping other places. So it's kind of like this, it feels sometimes like it's a rabbit chase. I understand that you were under, the instructions of the city manager. I get that. So this is no press on you guys, because you guys have done an outstanding job, and you're doing things that it is an unpleasant type of work, and it's really grueling work. So I just wanted to get a sense of that. Thank you, city manager, city attorney, but I do have, and deputy mayor, I do have another comment.
All right, thank you. We'll have some other comments and then come back to you, Councilwoman, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Councilman Kell, and then Councilwoman Ortiz.
So I know the city as a whole, has been doing its best to try to deal with this, but right now, it feels like the city government, we don't have a plan, short-term or long-term. And we need to get that plan set up ASAP. Some of these numbers, I look at these numbers where it says the average encampment is 3 to 5 years before complaints are made. That maybe prior to COVID, before this became as big of an issue in Topeka, that might have been true, because I used to work at DCF and I worked with people that were homeless, that when they told me where they lived, I'm like, okay, I drive by there all the time, I've never seen you. And they're like, well, I'm in a culvert or this or that. But these are, when it says hidden from sight from pedestrian and vehicular traffic, you go through the eastern half of the 5th District, you see encampments with structures built easily seen from the road, especially now with all the foliage we have that could be blocking it, you still see it. And a part of that also is like, it says, well, out-of-town owners that don't know. Well, some of these owners that I've talked to that live in town are actually waiting for the city to do something before they don't know the process that's going on there. So I think as a city, we need to be informing some of these places that are becoming encampments that are private property that, hey, you need to make the complaint if you want something done about it, because they're just waiting for us to act as a city on their property. It's happening right now over at 37th and Kansas area. They're building an encampment there. Another problem I see is BNSF is not pulling their weight on the situations on the railways and looking for the city for help, and they're a $1 billion company. They should be able to handle their stuff their own. There's been fires along the railway that have almost taken out buildings, businesses, and stuff that's left after the fire. BNSF hasn't cleaned it up at all, and it looks trashy. And it's as a person that has seen it day after day after day, that drives past it every day, it's kind of aggravating to sit there and see that we as a city just kind of just here and there throwing money at a situation, but with no plan. You look at the litter, you look at the theft, and there's shopping carts throughout the eastern half of the 5th District just piled up next to these encampments. I saw today, it looked like a rolling cart that comes off of semis for like a grocery store when they just stack all their stuff on there, is now sitting right outside an encampment. So there's another theft. One of those encampments had bike after bike after bike and shopping carts, and it's like, okay, where are these bikes coming from? And so it starts to get into our areas, like I said, with trash, with carts. Sorry, I wrote another note, I can't make it out. But then it eventually moves its way into the neighborhoods with theft and breaking into vehicles and things like that. So we as a city need to quickly make a plan of what we're going to do and move forward, because this is getting out of hand. I mentioned this to a couple council people years before I was even on council, that we don't want to turn into Portland, Oregon. Portland kind of had a wait and see approach. We'll take people as they come in, and Portland has gone downhill very quickly and is a very rough city. So I think we need to look at making that plan and moving forward as quickly as possible, because we don't want this to get out of hand problem where we can't, as a city, take care of it, and we have to start cutting out other areas to take care of this issue. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I want to thank our city staff for all the hard work that they've done. I was a part of that discussion with 501, and it was on private property. It wasn't ours. And we went down and we took care of that, helped them. It wasn't our issue, but we helped them, and I want to say thank you. So in one of my meetings with the city manager, I had asked him about a plan, and because I was at that particular time looking at the ordinance, and he said, just wait, I have something coming forward, but would never share with me what it was. And he assured me something was being done. I don't ever remember voting on a low barrier shelter. What is a low barrier shelter? I mean, some of my constituents are asking. I don't ever remember that coming before the governing body. And so then the next thing I knew is they were off to Colorado or off here or off there. I don't believe that there is a plan that we know of, and I don't know about any of the city staff. So I believe we need to put a plan in place. I'm disappointed in the consultant that she has not contacted she hasn't contacted me, I'll just put it like that, or has she contacted the governing body? I don't know if she didn't contact me because I didn't vote for her, but I feel like as we being the governing body, she should have been contacting us, and also as well as the city manager and some of our staff. I don't know if that's been done. So I'm saying to you, city manager, if we do need some answers. Is there a plan? She's going to come on July, whatever, date 25th, whatever they threw out there, and we know nothing, and we haven't been able to give her our input. You know, I said at the Oakland meeting, you guys have said at the NOTO meeting, Christina has said at both meetings, we all have something to add here, but it has not been brought to the table for us to add. And it's, what do we do? What do we do? You know, that needs to be relayed to her, that she needs to do that, if it hasn't been. We don't even know her plan. Her plan was to come in, my understanding, and connect the dots. That's why I didn't vote for it, because I felt like we should have been all able to, with all the agencies, we should have been able to sit down, get a mediator, and connect our own dots so we could have moved forward. I felt like we should have been able to change the ordinance so that we could move forward. We're waiting, what, 6 to 9 months? It's gonna be winter again. In my district, I've got more complaints. Staff seen it last night at a meeting. We've got people in the spray parks that are bathing in the spray parks, and I'm getting all kind of complaints about that. Now, I know that there's people that they have a lot of empathy for these people. Me and Councilwoman Haler, and I don't remember who else was on that. I think it was on the Public Health and Safety Committee, and when we tried to do the panhandling, people say, how dare you? But I think people are just tired of the people that are being aggressive. I got a call from a lady, and she was at 37th Topeka Boulevard, and she said the lady knocked on the window and asked her if she had any money. She told her no. She said, oh, can I have your coffee? She said no, so she started banging on her window. And to me, it's like, okay, this is just getting out totally out of hand. So we do need a plan, and we do need to know what that plan is, from the top to the bottom, from the city council to the city court, who I know has a mental health over there, to see what they're doing and how they're doing it, or if they're, I know, Judge, I know you're still doing it, but we need to be updated so people know what's going on. Because all they see is the trash, and all they see is the continued aggressive people out there, and the litter, and the fires. Yeah, they're gonna be okay in the summer, but then we're gonna start back with the fires. We're gonna start back, with the stealing. And thank God we haven't had a killing, but we have had that with our homeless. And I don't care if they're a $1 billion company or what, they need to be cited. If they're not going to do what they need to do to move them, to get them, then that's what they need to do. I want people to know that the council is hearing you. I kind of felt like our hands were tied. I'm hoping that with our new city manager, that he will cut those ties and move forward and show us where we can go now. And that's the first thing, is to get that ordinance and to really look at it. I remember when I was sitting there in Oakland and somebody said, they have a sheep up there. I drove up there, sure enough, there was a sheep. Me and Councilman Spencer, we talked about the days and how long you can camp places and putting up structures. And I think probably all of us now have good ideas on how to change that. We can't wait. Steve is gone. We need to press forward. And again, staff, we thank you for what you're doing, and any input that you see that's out there. We need your input on that as well, because Captain Stewart, you're right. You guys are the boots on the ground. But we need to know what's going to help you. We need to give you the tools to succeed. And when I look at all the money that we spend on the cleanups, it's crazy. It's just crazy. And I don't know how long we can endure that. So I would also like for this council to vote on, to learn more about the low barrier shelter, if that's what we're going to do. We heard about a little tent project, whatever that was called. And next I knew, they were talking about something else. We just keep throwing ideas out there and changing left and right, and we need to figure out what we're going to do. Like there's other cities and they have those tents, or whatever they were, those little houses. I think Neil was going to buy one, Hannah was going to buy one. I mean, they were 5,000. I mean, we just need to figure it out. And so that's what I'm looking for. But if nobody wants to bring that ordinance forward, I know Spencer said he would come along with me. I'm ready to do it, Spencer. I'm ready to do it, to bring it to the table. And you guys could either vote it up or down, but I think it's time. We don't need to wait any longer. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I've got a couple of questions, and then I'm going to go to Councilman Duncan and then Councilwoman Hiller. I guess my questions for the city attorney probably, I don't really understand the camping ordinance. So you can't camp under a bridge or in a bus shelter or flood control area, and then there's two areas. I assume one is basically downtown south of the river and one's downtown north of the river. It is legal to camp on any city right-of-way outside of those areas that's not under a bridge, is that correct?
Yeah, and I think to understand it, and maybe it would be helpful for the public, is a little bit of historical perspective. So I believe we amended our ordinance in 2018. Around that time, in the United States as a whole, it was not specific to Topeka, there was this court case bubbling up, Martin versus Boise in the Ninth Circuit. We are in the 10th Circuit, but there is a comparable type case in the district court in a 10th Circuit case. And at the time, city attorneys probably didn't take this case as seriously as possible because, if you want to be a constitutional lawyer, go practice city government law is what you do. But the Eighth Amendment was not one that we'd really thought about in terms of homelessness. The Eighth Amendment is the punishment against cruel and unusual punishment. In Martin versus Boise, the argument was that it was a cruel and unusual punishment to criminalize someone for simply being poor and not having a house. That case got litigated, and the Ninth Circuit found it was a cruel and unusual punishment. Even then, it was getting appealed to the Supreme Court. I was working at the League of Municipalities at the time. You just really didn't think the Supreme Court was going to not take that case up. But then they didn't, and Supreme Courts don't have to take cases up. They get millions of cases. Well, that's probably an exaggeration. Hundreds of cases a year that they deny cert on. So that kind of sent a ripple effect across the entire United States, and you started seeing litigation in lots of jurisdictions from various entities. Around that time, the city of Topeka, your predecessor, some of you were here, had spent about a year looking at your current ordinances outline homelessness. And you'd spent about a year as that case was percolating in committees and in front of the council, back to committees, trying to figure out where was the right balance. And so at the time, you found that the right balance was to say, okay, if it's cruel and unusual punishment to outlaw homelessness, if there's not enough beds, and part of that case law talks about it has to be beds that are not restricted. So for example, if it's based off you practicing religion or certain restrictions, that's not just a bed anybody could go use. That maybe the right balance was this camping ordinance. And I will tell you, I think the city of Topeka was not unusual in the time in making a pretty liberal ordinance because there was lots of litigation going on. The city of Topeka, as you guys were talking about it, if you go back through the files, there's, newspaper articles and other things about entities coming out and saying, but hey, it's illegal to criminalize being poor. So we made a pretty liberal ordinance at the time that only outlawed camping in very specific things that had rational purposes. So for example, we'd had the fire under the Kansas Bridge that did about $1 million in damages. It's very hard for fire trucks to get down on the levee. It's very hard to put out fires. So those were some of the areas that were included. And then I wasn't here, but I assume some of that discussion downtown was based off commercial enterprise and other areas that you're trying to revitalize and wanting those to not be areas like you see in Portland and other places where in the middle of your downtown you have a lot of camping. Retrospect, it's always 2020. 5 years later, 6 years later, you look back and that's a good time to look at your ordinance and say, did we guess right? That's the nice thing about law is the legislature comes back every year because it's hard to get it right the first time. And so 6 years later, there's been a lot more litigation, narrowing the laws and looking at what you can do. There are things like you were talking about today that you could look at as a body. The federal government only allows camping for so many days. There's cities that allow camping, but only in certain types of structures, like tents, a specific type of tent. There's cities that require you to move every so many feet. There's cities that only say you can camp from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. There's cities that say no camping in residential zoning areas. So there's lots of different types of things that you can consider. And I think 6 years later, you can look and say, maybe we did go too far in one direction, right? Like you sit back for 5 years and say, okay, we aren't going to worry about it. Then things get out of control. So these are the perfect types of discussions to have because the law's just evolved a lot. You take a really conservative approach 5 years ago, and now maybe it's time for a less conservative approach. So those are all really great dialogues, and I am always happy to write you any ordinance or give you any research you would like to do so that you guys can have those thorough discussions.
Okay, that helps. Let me phrase the question this way. So I own a piece of property. My property line's basically at the sidewalk. The right-of-way goes from the sidewalk to the street. If somebody shows up and camps on my side of the property line, I have every right to get them off, correct?
Correct.
Let me finish my question if I could. If they camp on the city side of the line in the area between the backer curb and the sidewalk, what happens at that point?
Well, it depends, which is the worst lawyer answer, but it depends on, do we really own that or do we just own an easement? So for example, if we only own a utility easement in a residential neighborhood, the city of Topeka doesn't own the land between my street and my house. I own that. I just grant you an easement for utilities. You only have the right to that public land for that very specific easement that I have granted you as a property owner. So no, they couldn't camp in that area. But if it's a right-of-way where the city owns the right-of-way and it's not an easement, we just own it, that's different. And so It's not an easy yes or no.
But if I don't mow that section between the sidewalk and the back of curb, will the city come and cite me?
If it's an easement, but if
No,
we
if
own
it's
it.
right away,
Yeah,
it's right
yes,
away.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Makes absolutely no sense to me, but let's move on. Councilman Duncan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a few quick things. You know, there's some issues that always come before us or problems, and we can just go find some other city that's figured it out somewhere. Problem is, no one's figured this out. I mean, literally, no one has figured this out. There are people who have figured it out around the edges and put some things in place that have helped the problem. Some made it worse, some made it better, but at least made some effort. We are, in some case, a victim of our own success. We do have things in place, as you saw tonight, and as we know, many organizations across the city who can help people. And I think it's a good reputation to have as a city when you can say, if you really need help and you come here, we will help you. We want to help you, we can help you, we will help you. The problem is we've reached some tipping point where we have folks who either don't want that help or because of mental health or addiction issues, which we have people working on, just we can't get them there yet. And so how do we address those individuals and deal with that problem? I think as we move forward, as we look at the long-term plan, which we have to do, that doesn't mean we don't do anything in the void. We can still take small steps to address the pressing problems as we move forward. And the beauty of local government is we can fix things quicker. If we err a little bit, it's easier to course correct as we move towards that long-term plan. And I think some of the frustration from a lot of our citizens is, and I don't think this is our intention, but the message they hear is we're working on it, we're working on it, we're working on it. And while we're working on it, they believe that and they see that, but they want to know what we're doing as we're working on it, and because the problem continues to evolve and grow. I think as we look towards the budget, I think that the Equity Access Shelter Program, which so far has been successful, but uses a lot of what I'll call not our tools. It's a very good job of using other resources and bringing them together. I think as we work through that budget process, giving that program some resources could make a huge difference in transitional housing to assist some people who are homeless now. And that's a solution we can work on today that can be an immediate solution. I think we need to do some review of our private property issues. I do not blame the current staff for the problem. I just don't think I think it's part of the direction from us to say, we have nuisance ordinances on the books. And if we have properties that continue to fail to take care of their properties, and our staff has to go out there on a regular basis and board them up one more time, we can fine them all we want. But at some point, they are violating criminal law and nuisance ordinances, and it's time to tell those property owners, get rid of the property or take care of it. We don't want you in Topeka. You're not helping the city. And so I think we need to look at toughening some of those up and really getting tough on those continual property owners. And I think that we continue to do a good job. The staff is doing a better job now than ever before of looking at the existing agencies and where we can put resources so that we don't have to start the program from scratch. We can just make sure they're getting the help they need, whether it's working through helping them get grants because they need to be connected to a city or other resources we have. Those are some of those things I think we can and should be looking at to beef up, as you will, to help people. The flip side of that is I want to be the city that does that, but that doesn't mean that we don't address the issues of just the camping everywhere, as it were. And as I have said here before, and in fact, I will meet with the city attorney this week, and we will talk about some sort of shell of a camping ordinance to bring to this governing body as a base, and this community as a base for discussion. Don't worry, we won't just put it right in front of you and say, vote now. We want citizens' input on it. We want your input on what it does. But its focus will be twofold. And it will be looking at, as you saw at the start, what we got presented with, as the Deputy Mayor's point, this sort of very strange, collection of locations. What we sort of have is that. What we don't have is a well-defined ordinance that sort of says less about where you can't camp and maybe gives direction on where you kind of can, so that our officers, when they go out, can say, look, you can't camp here, but we do have these locations. It'll also have, I hope, we think, a neighborhood component on it that will say that you can't just go into a neighborhood either, to address Deputy Mayor and other concerns about, well, can they really camp in this spot? So that will be the goal of that ordinance. It will not be to criminalize homelessness. That is not the goal, and I wouldn't support that. but it is to give us all and those who come to camp some better direction on what is and is not allowed. Because right now, like she said, we're just kind of scattershot. And so that will be the focus of that ordinance, and hopefully we can get that to you sooner rather than later. So thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilwoman Hiller and then back to Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I agree with and appreciate the comments everybody's made so far, as well as all the staff efforts so far. What I'm seeing in general, though, is that what we've got is two tracks. One is to manage, to have expectations of behaviors. I gave you all and met with the police department back in February. My first draft was started in January, talked in February. There are 13 ordinances that we already have that talk about behaviors that are not acceptable or that are expectations in this community. Things like trash, human waste, public decency, fires without at the wrong time or without in the right place, storage of combustibles and flammables, construction of structures and fences without permits, criminal behavior, including threatening behavior, animal control, including animal welfare, as well as behavior and leash and off-leash rules, guns, the right to have them and to use them, trespassing, floodplain rules, driving on the levees, and owners securing vacant structures and clearing vacant properties, as well as recently added additional penalties for repeat offenders. You know, I think sometimes we get caught up in trying to do something new when we have the pieces already in front of us. And what I'm hearing, what I heard back then, heard all along with the camping ordinance before really, is that we've got two tracks. One is, what are our standards in the community, and is everyone expected to abide by them? That would include full citizens of those homeless individuals. Same standards we all expect of ourselves and our neighbors. And then the second track is that coalition for services and support and referrals and helping people from wherever they are to move forward the best that they can. I think we can do both. Interestingly, what I thought we voted on when we approved having, she's not a consultant, but a facilitator, having her come, and I see that on the agenda for next week, I thought we were supporting having someone come in, pull all of our people that are involved, staff and partners, to evaluate what the issues are, what our strengths are, and what our plan should be. And instead, somehow, I don't recall voting on the low barrier shelter either. Somehow, after we voted to approve having that process go on, a decision was made that after that summit, oh, we're going to just do a low barrier shelter. I too want us to go back to that master planning. I think we do have the pieces. What happened was the one thing that clearly emerged was to pull together some sections of the code as well as the administrative regs on doing cleanups, on us taking care of cleaning up somebody else's mess and then telling them they could go back. That's actually very well done, but that's not what we want to be the only strategy that we have. And so for me, having those rules, campgrounds have been able to make rules on public property from time immemorial. You know, how long you can stay, that you have to take care of your property, your animals, you don't leave trash, you don't leave your stuff, and you have to leave if you don't follow the rules. I don't think there's any reason why we cannot do that on public property. Again, I brought what I handed out a couple of months ago. I think we can use what we have and simply make it clear. I think, John, you talked about the fact that these camps have been around for a long time. In my district, the camps are popping up new. And then people are coming back to that same property once it was, at least the people are moved out. Maybe it isn't even quite cleaned up. And I'm not hearing that there's a strategy yet for what to do, what to educate people. To me, campgrounds have rules. We have these, we already have them, to say you have to live by these rules to be here. In my experience, people are kind of surprised when they see a tent someplace, they didn't expect it, but what bothers them is the behavior and the trash and the all those related issues that I just ran through. And I'm sure I didn't catch them all, but when we already have the ordinances, and we can say, you know, if you've been camping someplace, if we come out, and that's in here too, a strategy, and someone observes that campsite is not meeting our standards, then we can say that's not acceptable, you have to go. And if you pack that stuff in here, you pack it out. And owners being responsible to secure and clear their properties. John and his team write them up all the time to pull that all together. I know that with adding our LLC strategies through changing our culture of property maintenance, that has really caused some folks who were not stepping up to step up. So there's a lot of education to do too, but I think we have the pieces. I'm looking forward to meeting Ms. Silver next week and seeing if we can't take the solid pieces that we have and then fill in the rest of them. And I've got extra copies of mine from January and February if anybody wants them. And I think that's it. I'm all in to help out with that,
Great.
whatever I can do.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
But thank you, Deputy Mayor. I guess before anything else, I want to say how refreshing it is after 3 years to finally have this come before the full governing body and everybody on board. It's really nice to see. I do want to ask the city attorney, also, I don't know if this would be city attorney or Brenda, the city clerk, I had provided an information article from 785 magazine that I want to be added to the record or to the minutes. However that is, if you could tell me about their direct pushback at a low barrier shelter after having, this article I think was done by Carice Mapes. I'm not sure, it came out this afternoon, but I want that added to the minutes because it was something that was discussed that was going to be breaking at the meeting last night in Noto. There were about 100 or some folks at Noto last night. This was not meant to be the answer because these are average folks. These are businesses that are bringing forth their ongoing concerns. I just want to also say NIMBY is not applicable to our district because we've dealt with this for decades and it's grown increasingly worse over the past 7 years at least. And so what I want to make sure is that the public can understand where we were initially with bringing up where I was, because I was not given any information by the city manager other than what felt like some type of backdoor dealing with the rescue mission, is that trying to find anything to get the encampments and the unsheltered off of the streets, the riverbanks, the neighborhoods, the garages in District 2. So I brought up low barrier shelter. I went to a meeting about 2.5 to 3 weeks ago with the businesses of Noto, where they said, let us tell you all the reasons why this is a terrible idea. One of, or two of the business owners at Noto directly visited the same low barrier shelter in Colorado Springs that former city manager Wade, people from the rescue mission, the mayor, whoever else went. And there is a direct and startling contrast in that they are asking, they're begging, and a petition is being worked on to slow all the dialogue down with a low barrier. And I agree with it because they did their research, they went and looked, and they are concerned that with the low barrier shelter, we will become a beacon in Kansas and beyond. And it will actually increase the crisis that we're already facing. So there's that reason why, yes, slow down is needed. We have to be deliberate and intentional on how we're dealing with this. The other thing is I had grave concerns about how everything changed up. I requested a copy of the consultant's contract. I requested emails that had been sent to the governing body. The issue of the low barrier shelter did not start being pushed until after the visit had been made, and then everything changed. Nothing of that is stated in the contract. So I was concerned when former city manager Wade came to me asking if I would approve a pilot low barrier shelter in the Topeka Rescue Mission, and I said no, unequivocally no. So this is just another example of the lack of objectivity. He's not here anymore, I get it. But that I don't think any plans could really be trusted that were brought up under his time with the city. One of the things that came out of the meeting was that citizens are asking to be a part of this process. We have terrible data. That's not the city department head's fault. The agencies that we interface with, we do not have the data. My concern is that if we push too quick on ordinances, then do we have beds? Have we interfaced with the agencies? Have we interfaced with the county? Because the county is wanting to come forth, or at least Cook does, with maybe up to $6 million. If we don't get out of the silos, then this can end up being a really big mess, worse than it already is. And so what this coalition of business owners is asking, and residents from District 2, is to have a seat at the table. And there were other people from across the city there. It was not just District 2. There was about 15 to 20% of people outside of the district that have the same concerns, that money will start getting spent, decisions will start getting made without everybody coming to the table, and to see if somehow we can partner with the county, the city, and come up with some kind of more in-depth cohesive plan. I am down to looking at ordinances, and Councilman Duncan, I asked to be a part of that conversation that you're gonna have with the city attorney, because that's applicable to, to District 2. And so I am just saying that we're at a point, I believe, where things are really just on the precipice right now. But if we don't get a game plan, like Councilwoman Ortiz was saying, but beyond just the ordinances, we don't even know if once we start kicking people off, are we gonna have the beds, or are they just gonna keep moving? We don't even have an idea. 35% may be from out of the city. How are we gonna handle that? And so I'm just bringing all of this up, just food for thought, because I know the consultant is gonna be here next week. I also know that I think it was a bad choice for me to, go in with that consultant, because I have grave concerns about how that whole first meeting went. I'm just so thankful that the city attorney let me attend that meeting. Otherwise, it would have been stacked. So that's all I wanted to say. And again, thank you again, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Kell, and then we'll have a last call for questions or comments.
So I think part of it, what we need to look at also, some comments have been made that made me think a little bit. I don't know if we can do voluntary, mandatory, whatever, but some type of register for when people are camping in a certain area, because as Councilwoman Hiller put down, what if someone's murdered? Or it might have been Councilwoman Ortiz, I can't remember which one. If we have no idea who was there when it happened, how are we going to solve that issue? So I think that needs to be happening there. Or if we find a lot of stolen goods or something like that, we know who was there. If they come back and find the police sitting there, they take off. At least that way we kind of know who was there, and we can go a certain way there. Councilwoman Ortiz, reminded me that, I also voted no on the consultant. I felt like we needed to use that money with our local agencies. And it seems like that's what we've done with this so far, is partner with our local agencies and have discussions with them. So we kind of, as I sit there and said, well, we're going to throw this money to someone from outside Topeka to tell us how to do it in Topeka, when we already have the agencies here in town. We can use that money to help get this situation going. And finally, I think we need to look at our hotels and what the residency requirements are when it comes to our hotels. I have 3 hotels in my district that are pretty much the many of them are just the panhandlers who go out, they work as teams, and then they get their money together, get a hotel room. What's the residency requirement? We need to look at, if there's a state law, city ordinance on that. In California, it's 30 days. You go from being a guest to being a resident. So we can look at that point, maybe cracking down on some of the hotel owners about what activities are happening, because one of the hotels in my district has a lot of criminal activity happening in it all the time. It's had murders in it. Police and fire are constantly there. Ambulance is constantly there. So we can look at things maybe not necessarily as a homeless issue, but as a city, trying to crack down on some of these hotels that in essence turn into apartment complexes with some of the ordinances there. But I like everyone else, I'm kind of waiting to see what the consultant says, because it feels like, as a governing body, we've been left out of the loop. And as I said before, I felt like this money would have been better served to work with our local agencies rather than an outsider coming in and having very little discussion with us.
Thank you, Councilman. I will ask the folks that have not made comments just to make sure. Councilwoman Nager, she is good. Councilman Emerson, all right, and Councilwoman Hofer.
I have to say your comment about a person who was camped on the edge of a property happened a couple months ago, probably about a mile from my house. And she was very scared, and thank you to the police department for going out and helping her. And I think that basically scared him off, and he is gone. The neighbors ended up cleaning up his trash to help her because she's very sick. I have to thank your department for putting condemnation notices on the Ramada. That's been a real problem in our district, and I'm constantly asked about that. And part of being new is not knowing exactly what is allowed, what's not allowed. So anything, and it will help more than just me, where you can camp, where you can't camp, and there's things in here I had not known till I read this. So I appreciate that guidance. I don't know whether the low barrier shelter is a good idea or not, but the money that has been noted in the budget, it needs to go to this problem, and we need to figure out where it needs to go, whether it is to more money for EAS or any of those 3 programs that we listed tonight, or if we need to send it to social service agencies. But this is the problem I hear about the most. Except this week. I hear more about trees this week. But it's on everybody's mind. And thank you to the people that sponsored the meeting last night in Noto. It was very good to hear what everyone had to say and their ideas and what they're dealing with. I'm lucky. I'm not very far. My business is not very far from there. We really haven't had to deal with it except when the Topeka Boulevard Bridge was being replaced. We had a few that were camping in our lot, and we were kind of landlocked. And they decided to strip cranes and sell the copper for money. One guy got caught, one didn't. And the one who did get caught and was at court, when we told him how much it would cost to fix the cranes, which is $45,000, he sat there and said, "No way, we didn't get that much money out of the copper." You implicated yourself, but they don't care. And he was not about to turn anybody else in. So it's a very frustrating problem, and we're going to have construction again soon. And I'd like to see something done before that starts. And that's all.
Thank you, Councilwoman. We've got 3 more items to discuss tonight, so let me just wrap this up in a minute or so. This is a complex issue, obviously, as Councilman Duncan mentioned. Oh, you want to say something? Or you're just pointing at me? Let me finish here if I could. As Councilman Duncan said, every city, every community is looking at this, and there's no easy answers. I do think we heard a couple of things tonight that are pretty clear from the discussion. One is that we need a clear plan, and we need a community plan. And I think that's, obviously, that's the direction you're headed. I think we heard that, but that came through loud and clear tonight. And then I think the second thing is, whether it's re-looking at the camping ordinance, looking at the law as it stands now, whatever it is, we need better definition on what's legal and what's not, and what we can do to alleviate just the widespread camping issue that we have right now. So I think those are two things that we heard, and I'd just like to add to what everybody else I think's already said. Thank you to the staff, John and his group, the police department, Public Works, WPC. I mean, you kind of like the storm last week, you grouped together, and I know Public Works gets out and supplies dump trucks and loaders and things like that when necessary. So thank you to the staff. Amanda, thank you for all your guidance, and City Manager, back to you.
Thank you, Mayor and governing body. As you can see, the homeless discussion is one that's fraught with emotion and fraught with frustration. I appreciated what Councilwoman Ortiz said, because I'm going to tell you, my thought about the consultants you have is I believe you have resources in this city. You could have turned to mental health agencies. You could have turned, and let me say you could, because we are going to have those conversations. Talk to mental health agencies, talk to Washburn University, who has a school of social workers. They also have some other resources that can help us. You're going to hear from the consultant next week. I'm not convinced that she should be here for the long term. I'm just not sure that's the direction we need to go in. I think it has to be a little bit closer to home that actually lives here and understands what we're doing. You weren't kept in the loop. There's a lot of things you weren't kept in the loop. I think you know what my style is versus what other style is. And this staff is doing everything they can to keep you in the loop, and so am I. And I believe that any email you send them and any email, any question you ask, you get answered. I'm relatively confident that they do that. And if there's an issue, then just talk to me. I am pretty lax with my staff when it comes to providing information back to the governing body, because you all have got to answer for it up here. All right? So I hope you have a sense that that's changing. We have to go back to basics on homelessness. I had about 3 conversations today with that came out of the Oakland meeting last night, and they were pretty good conversations, and they talked about trying to figure out how we get around the table and find solutions. And there's some things that have to be cast aside. I can't help you with the past, but I can tell you, sometimes you have to have a short memory about the past, because you can't move ahead if you're still upset about something that happened out here. The best way we can do is to move forward and try and work together. And I do want to say something about low barrier. There is no low barrier planning taking place in City Hall. And it is not going to take place unless you as a governing body say you want a low barrier shelter. So I want to say that again for the public. There is no low barrier planning taking place in City Hall unless the governing body says we want to move forward with it. So I hope that helps clarify some issues.
Very good, well spoken. Short. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Well, I'm sorry. I wanted to apologize to Major Harden. I messed up your ranking there. So
Okay.
that,
Very good.
and Neil, do you remember when we went to, I believe it was Omaha, and we brought that program back where we got a mediator that was not on the council and not in.
Long time ago.
What was the
Yeah.
name of that? It's something healthy. I'll think of it in a minute.
Yeah.
But that's what I'd like us to do. You get a mediator that's not with the city, not with the county, and it's not affiliated with any NIA group, and then you bring everybody together, put all our ideals together and figure it out. And that's what we did for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to
We'll
think of
figure
it.
it out.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Interestingly enough, Councilwoman Ortiz, we've had that discussion. I had that discussion with a person out of Noto today about that being a possibility. I think he has some ideas on that, so I believe in mediation, and I believe in having a third party there that has no interest in the discussion, except helping you come to a conclusion and develop strategies.
Great, yeah, perfect. Really good discussion. City Manager, appreciate your comments, appreciate the comments of everybody here. And it's an issue that we continue, I think the public understands, hopefully if they've watched tonight, that there's a lot of concern and we're moving forward to find the best answers that we possibly can. Let's move on to item 5B. Clerk will read.
B is discussion concerning the establishment of a city property tax rebate for 2024.
City Manager. City Manager, city property tax rebate.
Yeah, sorry, council people, my only excuse is one of your own kind of distracted me there, so.
We saw that.
All right. Councilmember Duncan is going to talk to you about the city property tax rebate. And I took a look at this, and I'll let Councilman Duncan explain it to you. But there are two places in Kansas, right? Two places up in the metro area that are
Three,
doing
maybe.
something
Yep.
similar?
3, I think, yep. Thank you, City Manager. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This came out of the Policy and Finance Committee. It is my idea, I guess, as it were, although, like we said earlier, sometimes you can take ideas and steal them from other places and put them in place, right? This is one of those. A little bit, this is a broken record for me. I don't believe you just cut taxes for the sake of cutting taxes, because as we constantly remind people, we have to pay for things, right? Police, fire, infrastructure, and you can't lose sight of that. If you just cut to cut, that's not great economic policy. I have said up here over the years, along with others, and said, but when you can find areas that you can target where you can make a difference, and when you can do a reduction of tax because of the money you're bringing in or the situation itself, you try to find those and pinpoint them and do what you can. And that's kind of what this came out of. It's really pretty straightforward in that we didn't try to reinvent anything. We've looked at the model of the Kansas Homestead Program. And essentially what this does is if you are of a certain age and in a certain low income tax bracket and you've lived in your home for a set amount of time, you can get a rebate up to a cap amount on your property. Obviously, we can only do the city property tax portion. That can go back to you. The state and other programs have a few other contingencies, have to be current on other taxes. You have to live in the home. You can't just own 5 houses and get it on all of them. It only applies to the one you live in. And so there's some rules like that. And the goal is to just assist those individuals who are looking at their monthly bills as they've gotten to an age and their income goes down, and say, how do they stay in that home long term? And if this money helps them pay 5 more electric bills that they could have paid using these dollars, and helps them stay in that home longer before having to look to either some sort of transition housing, moving in with family, whatever that is, then if we can do our part, great. The fiscal note on this is not huge in the grand scheme of things. It would also still have to be an application process. It's not going to break the bank. And that's where it comes from, and that's pretty much what it is. And as we get into budget talks, hopefully we'll talk about other mill levy decreases for everybody, but tonight, this is what I have in front of us, and just an idea that, as the city manager said, there are 3 cities, Shawnee, Merriam, and Roland Park, I believe, are the 3 who are doing this to some success so far. And like I said, we're not trying to reinvent anything except what the state has already established. It is a rebate program, not what I would call an exemption program for a variety of reasons. One of them being very practical, and this may change in the future, is as the county has to actually play a role in this, their computer systems only do certain things a certain way. And so changing those computer systems is very costly. So maybe someday we can get it to be more of that kind of program so the money doesn't have to come in and then go back out. But that's why I've had that question a few times. Why is it a rebate program? And that's part of it. Not the only reason, but that's part of the issue too. So with that, I guess we'll open up to questions or concerns or comments or anything else anyone has.
Questions from the body? Councilwoman Hiller?
Just one comment at this point, and you touched on it, I think, in some of your language in here. You might want to check what the cost of administering something like that would be. I recall that, maybe 5 years ago, our staff reported in I think it's the water piece that we do as a city, that it was taking somebody almost full-time to manage that relatively small amount of money, just because each one of those applications had to be processed and verified. In that case, we were paying directly to the utilities as the money came through, that it just was almost not cost-effective. And ultimately, we contracted that work out. But nonetheless, the overhead was pretty substantial. And again, you mentioned that could be the case in your text, I think, but might be some homework that would be available for you.
No, that's a good point. We'll take a look at that, because I don't know how much of that is done by the county versus us. We've looked at some of that.
But once you're looking at whether people qualify,
Right.
whether their application is legit and so on, again, how they do it, it's out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, Councilman, as we've spoke about this, I do support property tax relief, but I'm always a little bit hesitant to just, frankly, target one group, simply because I think we all need property tax relief. And I'll tell you, I mean, honestly, my wife and I became empty nesters a couple weeks ago, and my son went off to basic training, and we were actually just last night driving past the high school, and we thought, my gosh, this is the first year, like 20-some years, we don't have to buy textbooks, pay all those fees and stuff. So frankly, maybe people in my age group, and maybe till about 60, pay full board. I don't know, maybe everyone else gets an exemption or something. But I guess more than that, I'm always concerned that, frankly, government always expands to spend every dime they can get. So I would be very interested in lowering it for everyone to the extent possible, and not having to do all the rebates and stuff. Let's just lower it to the extent we can. And I totally understand and support what you're doing, but I'd love to go further.
Yep, understood. Sir.
So thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Looking at the screen, see none. This is just a discussion item, no vote on it, and no one signed up for public comment. So we will move on to item 5C. Clerk will read.
C is discussion regarding the proposed redevelopment incentive grant program for the Noto Business Improvement District in the amount of $50,000 for 2024.
And this is Councilman Duncan again.
Thank you. This also came out of Policy and Finance. It mirrors the current program that exists in downtown Topeka. There has been interest, I think, for several years for something to also apply to the Noto district, not only because of all that they bring to the city of Topeka, but obviously to the properties down there that have some historic value and commercial value. This program would allow people to get some grant funding every year, qualify for it, to do improvements in that area. Again, it's modeled after the downtown program, and we thought, in truth, Noto really gets very little, if any, city dollars as a general rule compared to some other programs, and God bless them, they've made do. But we thought it might be time for something that we certainly capitalize on as a city and promote heavily. It was time to maybe push forward a similar program for them that mirrors downtown. So that's where it came out of, and even though I'm doing most of the talking, and I support the policy, so did both members of the committee, Councilmember Valdivia Alcala was instrumental in making sure this got in front of us and was brought forward as it's in her district. So I don't know if any of you have comments.
Thank you. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you. I would just say this is something that NOTO, Tom Underwood, has been working on very hard. I mean, Tom has worked with former city manager, he's worked with different department heads and myself to try to look for any way to apply for additional grant funding, for additional monies, et cetera. So this $50,000 is the culmination of Tom's persistence and understanding that need for more equity to be happening there in NOTO. So, Councilman Duncan was very supportive on this with policy and finance. And ultimately, City Manager Wade was as well. And I think that this is, I know it's going to be having some, tweaks to it that Tom had sent an email about earlier on. But this is a good deal, and I think that something that NOTO needs and that their executive director has really pushed hard for.
Thank you. Any other comments? Oh, Councilwoman Hiller.
Just briefly, I'm supportive of this. I spent some time with Tom this weekend just to understand the differences. I've gone through the inauguration of the downtown one, and then its sort of progressive life without many changes. It's pretty well tested. I know that NOTO was interested in something just about like it. I reviewed both of them, really encouraged with our transition in city manager, when it said, let's give them the money and let the city manager figure out a contract, I thought, oh no, that we don't have time for that. And also that we on the council might want to be more confident about exactly how close they were. My understanding is I think we can be confident in giving direction to the city manager to do one that is either exactly like, I mean, obviously you need to change the names and the street names and so on, but I think we're pretty close so that we could be confident that that tested model is what he's looking at. Just to confirm that from me.
Thank you, Councilman Duncan.
So then I do have a question, because I did see a list of some suggested or recommended changes that maybe wanted to be made to this, and maybe they don't, maybe that. So I guess my question is this, and the changes I saw, I have no objection to. I mean, they were small tweaks that Mr. Underwood had said, maybe we should have done this. So this is very legit, and I'm good either way with this. Do we want to entrust that those changes come back to us when we vote on this in a document, or do we want to send this back to policy and finance so when we meet next month, we can make those changes there and then bring it back to the council? I can live with either of those options. I just want you to know that the flexibility is out there. We're willing to do it whichever we think works best.
I think it's pretty close. There were just some things that were changes that probably didn't have to be made, that the experience of downtown had been through already. And so I didn't want it to have to take a whole lot of time for them, even with a contract approved in the next 2 weeks. It'll be the end of the year before, with a grant round and so on, before they could give out the first round. So I just didn't want the new city manager to end up starting from scratch on it.
Thank you. Seems reasonable, unless this has to be done in a couple of weeks, to take it back to policy and finance for discussion.
I talked to Tom at Link today, and I've talked to Councilwoman Hiller about it. Send us a contract between Amanda and I think we can sit down with all the parties, get that work through, and get it back to you. And it sounds like a lot of the work has been done through cutting and pasting, which is a time-honored technique.
Okay, well, we'll look for that document, and then if we have any, if you wouldn't mind then sending it to the members of the committee.
Yes.
And that way, if any of us have something we want to ask about, so we don't have to take up the time here, that would be helpful.
Yeah, let us work it up first, and we'll most assuredly get it to your committee.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, I note that it is 8:10. We have probably two fairly long discussion items ahead of us, plus an executive session. Is there a desire for a break before we? I see that desire expressed. All right, we will take a 10-minute break. We will reconvene at 8:20.